Josh Hennig back here on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. We are streaming live as always in the Dr. Squatch virtual studios. And joining me is one of the best pass rushers of the 21st century. You know, for those who don't remember, for a 3-year period, Shawne Merriman was like the apex pass rusher for then the San Diego Chargers. Shawne, how you doing? Welcome back to the 97.3 ESPN.
I'm doing well, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. You know, I got to ask you this because as someone who played in the league, there's so many guys right now in this free agency who are signing 1-year contracts. Like usually, you know, guys want to get a little security, right? They want the 3-year, the 4-year. What is your perspective as a guy who played in the league? Why so many guys are signing 1-year deals this offseason?
Well, because teams are trying to win now without making a long-term investment, right? So take, for example, if you're a team right on the cuffs and you bring in a pass rush, you bring in a big wide receiver, you bring in a guy who can help you win right now, but you're not committed to a long-term deal, it actually works out for both sides because guess what? If that player goes out and performs, he can go sign another 2 or 3 year deal somewhere else. Get in. I'm telling you, the whole goal of this thing is to get in and out of deals, right? Get a contract. And then position yourself for a longer, bigger term contract, but show yourself, right? Prove yourself that you can go out and play. But man, it's for a lot of these teams who are right on the cuffs that need to win right now. Because mind you, when you talk about those times back in the day and what it is now, these coaches, they don't have time. They don't have time to regroup again. You win right now, you're out the door.
You mentioned about winning now and out the door. You know, one of the conversations we have in our area that, obviously this is NFC East country, Eagles, Giants. You just saw the Giants finally bring in, no offense to previous guys, but a guy who has real experience, right, Sean? Someone who is John Harbaugh. And in Philadelphia, you still have a contingent of people who are wondering, is Nick Sirianni going to keep his job for how long? Like, doesn't that speak to in some way the temporary nature of the NFL, right? That you have a guy in Sirianni who just won a championship a couple of years ago, and now people are wondering how long he's going to keep his job.
Yeah, and that's the scary part, right? We always knew as players, NFL stood for not for long. So if we didn't perform, we knew we were gone. It's kind of trickled up to the coaches now, where you got coaches that, like you just said, just won a championship a couple of years ago, and it's what have you done for me lately? And we're going to start seeing more of that because there's so many young up-and-coming coordinators, right? Take like a Kubiak from Seattle, or take a Ben Johnson who was in Detroit, now winning out in Chicago. So you can go around the league and look at these young up-and-coming coordinators. Now you look at these head coaching jobs; they're up for grabs after a couple of years, because there's so many opportunities for these young up-and-coming coaches to get an opportunity. So, again, man, we haven't seen anything like this, and that's why you're seeing these short-term deals happening over the course of time.
Talking with Shawne Merriman, of course, he was the first-team All-Pro with the San Diego Chargers, one of the best pass rushers of the 21st century, joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. You mentioned as a former player, what does a player look for in a coach? Like, explain to the audience, because you know how it works. You got commentators on TV, and they're spouting their mouth about what a coach is or isn't. But as a player, what matters to you when you walk into those meetings, when you go to those practices?
I just talked about the coordinators and how they're up and coming. Well, the difference from a coordinator and a head coach is a head coach is a manager of everybody, right? Like, there's no going into an offensive team meeting room and staying there all day, or defensive team meeting room and staying there all day. You have to manage the entire team, entire staff, entire situation. So that's why you see some of these coordinators that are really great coordinators, and they go and try to be head coaches. They're not good head coaches because they're not a manager of everybody, right? Manage your practice schedule, manage his routine, manage, what happens on what day. And some of these guys aren't that great at doing it. Now, I always preferred a Sean Payton. I always preferred a Marty Schottenheimer. I love those old school coaches, but it's kind of going away from that now. That's why you saw seeing a lot of these older coaches are gone. Mike Tomlin, who's had you can talk and say whatever you want to, but he had a great career, his body, he had a great body of work and what he's able to accomplish in the National Football League. But you're starting to see a lot of these older coaches not be there anymore because you need to have some sort of relationship with players. It's never been that way, right? Where you have to be more of a player's coach, understand these younger guys and the way they operate now in order to get the most out of them.
You mentioned about Mike Tomlin. I feel like Tomlin, you're right. He is symbolic of the kind of guy that, I'm not trying to cast aspersions, but I feel like certain team owners are, I'll say it. They're almost afraid of them. They're almost afraid of the strong personality coach, right? Is that a fair assessment that it feels like some of these team owners, they are almost like they don't want to bring in somebody who's going to put their foot down?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you remember I don't know if this is true or not, but the rumor about Vrabel being too big, right, or too voiceful in the building, that was like, yep. It came across he was scaring staff. I mean, I don't know what all that means. Maybe it might have been a rumor, but again, when you have somebody who comes in the door and requires a lot, a team owner can possibly say, look, we don't want somebody in the building with that much control, period. We don't want somebody coming there and saying, hey, they're going to have authority over the draft picks. They're going to have authority over personnel. They have authority on a lot of these things. And the team owner, I believe that's why, Bill Belichick doesn't have a job in the NFL. When he took that visit down to Atlanta, from what I understand, he was asking for everything in the kitchen sink.
Yep.
So, you got a young up-and-coming coordinator that is probably not going to require a whole lot because he wants to get that head job. So he doesn't have the resume to go to a team owner or a general manager or whoever is there and say, look, this is what I want. And so, again, they're just getting in the door. They don't have that kind of leverage just yet until they start winning games and they take control over more things happening in the building. So, yeah, absolutely. That's why you're seeing a lot of these coordinators hired at the head coaching position, because a lot of the other guys, if Mike Tomlin gets hired somewhere else, you think he's not going to come in there and say, hey, I want authority over who we draft, who we can let go, who's in the front office. There's a lot of control that a team has to give up with a experienced coach.
Yeah, my perception, again, I never played in the league. Obviously, you can see me. But, I'm a little too short. Sean, I'm a little too short to have played in the NFL. But for me, I look at it from the outside in as, you hire somebody, maybe not for, literal, put your fist down control, right? But it's the idea that, Mike Tomlin has probably seen more football and he's forgotten more football than the person he's talking to even knows. And these owners, no offense, some of them, they're just very rich people who are good businessmen. They don't know football. And that's where the weird dynamic is, because you see some of these organizations, and you can speak to this better than I can. You played for the Chargers, you played for the Bills. Certain organizations, you can tell they're well run. The owner says, hey, I'm going to hire you to do a job. And you have other owners who like to meddle and like to be in control of their little toy.
Yeah, look, being a business owner myself, being rich doesn't make you smart. It makes you you know how to hire, right? You know how to hire the right staff, assemble the right team, and the job for everybody in that building is make the owner look good. That's what it is. And again, because of some of these owners, I'm not going to say all, because you got some owners that are really hands-on and know everything that's going on from the front office all the way down to what's in the playbook. I mean, you got some of those owners that know everything, but you have some that's pretty much hands-off, that's relying on these experts, right? A general manager comes in and he brings his people in who he thinks that it could rebuild that organization. We've seen it firsthand with the Chargers, them hiring Joe Ortiz coming in, and what happened. You got Jim Harbaugh, and they start building that whole staff and created this mindset that they wanted the team to have. And so, yeah, being the owner, you have to make those decisions to bring in the right staff, and you're just taking advice from who you think is the expert in their field. And that's the way this thing works.
Shawne Merriman joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. Speaking of the Chargers, of course, he was the Rookie Defensive Player of the Year, All-Pro, pass rusher with the Chargers back in the mid-2000s. Speaking of owners and how they handle the team, one of the things that the Eagles owner, Jeffrey Lurie, gets complimented on is how he's willing to give guys money up front. He's willing to give, big signing bonuses to alleviate the cap on the back end. And I think what's interesting in Philadelphia is that, you see how some of the former players, they speak so highly of the owner. And I think that's a very interesting thing because, not every team has an owner where the players, you see Robert Kraft with the Patriots, he's another one, where these owners, they are a topic for the players to say, I enjoyed working with being in that organization.
No, 100%. And it changed the way guys perform. I'm not, to be quite honest, when you have an owner that cares about you, and we all understand this business, right? You get cut, waived, traded. That's a part of the game, but it's also a way of how you do it, right? And, when you see guys cut right before training camp, well, guess what? The owner in the front office may be giving that guy a shot to go get another team instead of cutting him, right, somewhere at the end of training camp where the roster's filled up. So we all understand that it's the business side of things, but you will, and I know for sure, and I'm speaking from experience, you will go overboard or run through a wall for a front office and a team and a head coach that cares about you.
Yeah, like for example, we saw Jason Kelsey in our city, how he spoke so highly of Howie Roseman, the GM of the Eagles. You were mentioning about the old school coaches. I want to get back to that for a minute because, the Eagles have one in Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator. And I think one of the more interesting stories about the Fangio situation in Philadelphia is, Shawne, the young players, the young guys, the Jordan Davises, those guys, they embraced the hard coaching. They believed in it. And now you see Jordan Davis get that big contract extension this offseason. You see him go and lose 30 pounds and become a leader in the locker room. What does it say to you that you have the young generation saying, no, I like this old coach. I like this hard coaching.
I love it. I love it. And, I'll use this situation, not really to poke at Russell Wilson, but when Russell Wilson left Seattle and he had a different head coach, right, different style, and he went down to Denver, you're talking about two ends of the spectrum, right? Because Sean Payton is going to be up in your face. He's going to be on you. He's going to, he's going to challenge you. He's going to say things that maybe get under your skin. And if you can't take it, you're not going to perform there. But I also think that, that's why he's much different than a quarterback they got now. You see them several times on the sideline go back and forth at each other, right? And it's respect level. So I appreciate the younger guys that still want to be coached hard because it's already, and I hate to say this, not soft, but, these guys put on pads, 10 times a year during the season. Practices are much different. So, having a coach that will kind of put his foot down when necessary, or that you got to go and perform for and get things done, or there's going to be consequences. I think that trickles down to just the discipline and respect you have in the locker room and the rest of the team.
Is there a guy in today's NFL, let's say that so I'm going to create a scenario. Let's say we stole Wolverine's ceiling factor, injected it into Shawne Merriman, and Shawne Merriman has 1 year to play left in the NFL. Who would you want to come back and play for in today's NFL?
There's a few coaches. I could definitely play for Jim Harbaugh. I think he still has, that both Harbaughs. I can play for both of those guys. Sean Payton, I can play for coaches like him, and there's several coaches I can play for. But again, I can play for anybody because neither style bothers me. But you have some guys who are not built that way, that needs a certain level of coaching. You can't get on them in certain ways without them kind of tucking their head and tucking their tail and can't go out in there perform and function because the coach just ripped them. So, I can play for anybody, but again, I wouldn't mind playing for the old school coaches at all.
Who's a quarterback in today's NFL that as a pass rusher you look at and you say, you know what, I really would love to hit that guy. Not because you hate the guy, but because it's almost like an accomplishment to get that guy down.
The same. So back when I played, I've always had that badge of honor that I got after Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger. Nowadays, I would have to put Patrick Mahomes up on that platform because I would love to get after him. He's such a great quarterback, and he's going to go down as a Hall of Famer and one of the best to do it, man. But his competitive spirit that he has would drive me crazy. Like I love watching him and Max Crosby go back and forth with each other. I love that because there's a respect level between the two.
You mentioned about Peyton Manning. I think it was the NFL Films thing where they caught you hitting Peyton one time with the Colts. And, Peyton basically criticized you for maybe hitting him a little too hard. And you were like, well, I got to hit you hard. I got to stop you from throwing that ball.
Yeah. It's crazy enough, man. Every time I see Peyton, I go up and give him a big hug, man. And I just enjoy playing with him. And were playing against him, and also too being around him, seeing what kind of person he is away from the field. And it kind of brought everything together, man, because he was so knowledgeable. He was so smart. I think his nickname was the general, right? I mean, he just took such charge, but there's only one way to get him on the ground, and that's normally as hard as I possibly could. So
yeah, he's not a small guy, right?
And a small dude.
He's not one of these. You see some of the guys in today's NFL like Kyler Murray. It's like you hit him, you're probably gonna break him. Whereas Peyton Manning, you got to hit him, or a Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, that's a big dude right there.
Yeah, man. I mean, what's crazy is back when I played, you either had one type of quarterback or you had the other. The Josh Allens and Justin Herbert, these guys, they didn't exist. You had Tom Brady, who was more of a stable quarterback. Peyton Manning was stable. Ben Roethlisberger is probably the closest one who can stand in the pocket or can get out the pocket and still be just as accurate and hurt you with his legs as well. But man, it's a tough. It's a different ball game now than it was then. And Max Crosby, Von Miller, and Cam Jordan, they have this sack summit that they do in Vegas every year. Last year, I went out there. I was coaching up some of the younger guys. And I just saw how the game changed, how they pass rush, how they view, how they share information. Because back when I played, we didn't want to tell nobody nothing, right? We wanted all the sacks. We wanted to lead the sacks. We didn't share anything. They share information, and they just push each other to kind of get better.
Shawne, before we let you go, and I appreciate your time today here on 97.3 ESPN, why don't you tell everybody what you're up to in your post-football career? You mentioned how you're a business owner. I know you're involved in the combat sports world, So tell everybody about what you're involved in. Yeah,
we got some more big announcements coming. I got a huge announcements coming more in the combat sports space. As you know, I was founder of Lights Out Extreme Fighting. MMA in particular, but combat sports is so global, right? I mean, the NFL will always be king here in the States. When you start getting outside the States and some of the area, regions like South America and over in Asia and other places, I mean, combat sports is king. Everybody in this world love combat sports. So we got some big announcements coming as well.
And for those who don't know, that was actually the initial opportunity you and I talked years ago is when you launched Lights Out. You and I had the conversation about it. So we'll have to have you back on when those new announcements drop. He's Shawne Merriman, of course, one of the best pass rushers of the 21st century, All-Pro with the Chargers, and he joined us here on 97.3 ESPN. Great stuff today, Shawne.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.